Welcome back to our Economics of Innovation course. It's almost too hot to have the lecture. Actually, it's too hot for my computer. That's why we had the problem last week. It was too hot, and then the computer turns the CPU speed down. Hopefully it works today. I built my own handmade cooling. Hopefully it works. And you will see, obviously, it was as hot last year as it is this year because I experienced problem there as well. You will see that in a detail. But first of all, before I really start, I just want to ask you to join me in WebEx so that you can always give me feedback and tell me and ask questions, of course, and also tell me if there is some problem with the stream, unless you also have run into trouble with the heat and performance of your PC or whatever you have. Okay, and another thing I want to draw your attention to is our seminar we are going to offer. Actually, my chair of Industrial Organization, Regulation and Antitrust is going to offer in the winter term. And the topic will be competition policy and regulatory topics with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you want to dig deeper in the topics, for instance, of the case studies, we will have, I think, in 2 or 3 weeks here on how to provide the right incentives for the development and production of vaccines and so on. This would be the right seminar for you to apply. The seminar itself is in German. However, if you don't speak German, you might as well present in English and, of course, write your topic paper also in English. Okay, before I start with the stream, I just want to reiterate that we will have these technical problems. You will see audio and sync is not, or audio and video is not always in sync. Wherefore, you will once in a while see this, if it works, these PowerPoint slides. So these are the current slides, and I will just view them instead, and you will hear just the sound from the stream. Okay, hopefully it works well. If not, just tell me in the stream. Okay, in the chat. Okay, so I think that's pretty much what I wanted to tell you. There will be many problems, as you will see, but at the end you get a bonus. You will, if time permits, I will present to you some Mathematica simulations on dynamic pricing, critical mass, and tipping. And in a few minutes, you will know what these topics mean. Okay, I start with the stream right now. Welcome back to the Economics of Innovation course. Today we will deal with what about 20 years ago was called the new economy. So our topic will be network effects, standards or standardization, and compatibility. Here I already mentioned this new economy. So 20 years ago, these network industries, in particular the so-called ICT sector, the information and communication technology sector, the high-tech sectors, were rather prominent in a sense, and in particular they also were considered as very important for the knowledge-based economy. So remember what we did in the very beginning of the course, where I mentioned this Lisbon goals and so on, and the Barcelona goals. So Europe as the most important dynamic knowledge-based economy, and the particular focus, of course, was on these sectors. These sectors today, perhaps it's still relevant, but it's a slightly different terminology. We speak of digitization, we speak of Industry 4.0 in Germany at least. And still, these sectors have some very specific characteristics which are very important, I think, today as well. And I think we will cover a few of them, and I try to explain all of them by means of small models and to just give you some idea what is behind this different concepts. So what probably is obvious to do is something like the term complementarity. So you have complementarity between hardware and software. You have complementarity between operating system and software and so on. So we will get back to that later on. Compatibility, even in terms of the Corona crisis, it's a huge topic because, for instance, if you have an older smartphone, you won't be able to install the Corona app. Standards is also an interesting topic, also with some current relevance. For instance, if you go to Austria, you will have a different Corona app than in Germany, and these different Corona apps are not compatible, or so they don't have the same standard. So that's certainly a problem. And of course, For instance, if you have FaceTime, that is not compatible with your Android phone, and so on. So we will discuss these topic in the next 40 minutes or so. As always, if there are some questions or if there are problems with the streams, just drop me a note in the WebEx chat. Okay, the next very important topic is what we call network externalities. These are consumption externalities and could also be called demand-side economies of scale. I will define them in more detail on the next slide. The basic point is that the utility of one user of a certain technology or system or platform increases if more users join this platform. There are also switching costs and login. So I don't know how many of you switched away from WhatsApp after Facebook acquired it. Certainly the problem you are somehow logged in because it's not only you that has to switch to a different messaging platform, but all of your contacts would also have to move at the same time, and this really causes then switching costs, and as a consequence we might have what is called a login. Of course, there are other points, like if you're used to a certain software program, you might face training costs if you want to switch to a different one, and so on. And finally, in particular with respect to this information technology, there are significant economies of scale in production. So all these kind of software products typically have marginal costs which are close to zero, for instance, and high fixed cost. Somehow it also holds for the hardware. If you think in terms of a new plant for microprocessors, the fixed cost or the sunk cost are there in the billions, in a sense. Okay, so I want to define now, or to go into the detail with the different topics here and give you some more definitions, and then we'll just move on with some analysis of these. So it seems that we still have the problem. At least YouTube just keeps telling me, but I guess hopefully I turned off a few other programs, so it will should work in a few seconds again. Okay. And anyway, you will see I reiterate this part a little bit later anyway. Concepts. Okay, definitions. So network effects, what does this mean? A network effect arises if each user's payoff is increasing in the number of other users of that good or of goods compatible with it. And very closely related concept is that of the network externalities. Here's that is consumers' preferences exhibit network externalities if the utility of each consumer increases with the number of other consumers purchasing the same brand or being on the same network. So the most obvious part, and I think I have that here for these network externalities, is like actually here fax email, or actually think of WhatsApp. So the number or your utility from WhatsApp increases in the number of users because you can reach them. Same of course language. If you learn a foreign language, it will be good to learn English because English is in a sense the most widespread language in the world. So you have network externalities, and the more use this platform, here the language as a platform, the higher is the utility. Network effects in a sense is a more general concept because it also covers the case in which your utility does not directly depend on other users using this platform. Like in WhatsApp, it's clear you depend on your grandmother also using this platform, because then you can reach her on WhatsApp. In terms of, say, your iPhone or your Android phone, it's the number of users which uses that platform, because what happens if more users use a certain platform, actually that's what I always have to, where I'm always rather sad as a previous user of Windows Phone, there were insufficient number of users of the Windows Phone operating system, and that meant that hardly any developer produced or developed apps for this. So much more software, much more apps will be available for such a system, depending on or if the number of users is larger. So that's a network effect. Yeah, compatibility. What is compatibility? Or how do we define compatibility? So somehow we might use rather different kinds of definitions. The first one is that products are compatible if they can work together, but this is somehow probably too loose. The point is we might to make that more specific. Okay, second try. Hopefully the stream works now. I certainly will have some further problems, but we'll see whether we manage it. Okay, so I started with this part and already gave you some definitions in terms of compatibility. Hopefully this worked as well. And I started discussing these topics. I just look up where the stream works. Stream should work right now. Okay, hopefully you got something in the very beginning. I don't know, I had many problems. Perhaps I just do that. You should have heard these definitions on network effects, on quick again, on network externalities. So I gave these definitions here, a network. So I have to become more patient here. Network effects being the more general concept, and then network externalities. Okay, I don't know if I have a pen right now. Yes. Network effects, the general concept, you are interested in having many people on, say, the PlayStation, because then many games are developed for the PlayStation. That's why you gain if there are more users on that platform, and that's to be distinguished from the network externality point. Okay. Yeah, and I think I gave you already certain examples here. And then I defined compatibility. So we define we have various definitions: strongly compatible, downward compatible, one-way compatible. I already explained that, and it should be rather clear. One-way compatible is already also introduced. And there are many examples in the past here. Video cassette records, you all don't remember that. We will get further examples when we discuss standards and standard wars. But what is clear, you have all these discussions everywhere. So suppose even you cannot use your standard charger if you want to charge your Apple iPhone because it has a lightning connector, and so on. So that's where what you have everywhere. You have everywhere the discussion of compatibility and standards. So you cannot, of course, use your LP record in your CD player and so on. You cannot easily move your apps from one device to the other device. In former times, it was not possible to make calls from one cell phone system to the other, but we have standards on that right now. But for instance, for some time, you could not use your European cell phone in the US because they had a different standard. Okay, what I want to do now, hopefully the stream works now. I want to present to you a rather famous model. This is a model going back to Jeffrey Rolfs and published in 1974 already. It was called the theory of interdependent demand for a communication service. And this is a network externalities approach. And what you will see here is the importance or what strange kind of demand you obtain once you take into consideration these kind of network externalities. Suppose we have a standard continuum of consumers, so 100% consumers, willingness to pay, so in a sense an autonomous willingness to pay, or willingness to pay of 1 minus x. And the point is here that we have a network effect, and this is this n. So your willingness to pay depends on the number of users. So here n is a number of users, and this can be between 0 and 100%, so between 0 and 1. And the p is the price of subscribing, and your utility, irrespective of you have a low, in a sense, autonomous. It's not an autonomous utility. It's just in a sense, a willingness to pay for some thing like WhatsApp. So some people hardly care for WhatsApp, other almost die if they don't have it. So it will be different. But for all of them holds that their utility increases in the number of users. Okay. And the interesting thing is that we get a really strange aggregate demand function in this situation. Look at a consumer X hat who is indifferent between subscribing and not subscribing, given some expected number of subscribers. So think of the WhatsApp, the Windows phone I have been using. Of course, my utility would have depended on the number of users of Windows Phone, because I know if there are hardly any users, there won't be any apps available. And of course, Microsoft would have told me that billions of people will use the Windows Phone. And of course, it's very important what actual users have in terms of the expectation, how many people really will use this service. Okay. And the question is then, what expectations are in a sense rational, or in technical terms, it's called fulfilled. What are fulfilled expectations? In order to get this point more clearly over to you, the point is just assume that we have a price of 0.2, and we assume that everyone subscribes to this service. But then, of course, if we have a price of 0.2 and we assume everyone subscribes, what would our x hat be? If we solve for that, x hat would then be, so we get here 0.2 on the other side, and actually have then 1, okay? it's just 1 minus n would be 1, so it's very easy. So put n on the other side, actually n would easily be just 80%. So what is the problem here? Is that consistent? Is that rational? Of course it is not. You expect 100% users, but only 80% would, or only the guy at 80% would have a willing, would have an incentive to buy. Okay, so it's irrational to assume that 100% actually subscribe to this service. Similar, if we start up with 0.5, assuming that only 0.5 will subscribe, then we get P divided by 2, so we will get 0.4. Actually, with 0.5, our x hat, check this later on, our x hat will be 0.6. So we expected that only 50% of all people subscribe, but actually for the guy with the 60% lowest willingness, he or she still has an incentive to buy. So this is not rational either. And the only thing is rational is that just you start with a very simple kind of thought. You think, okay, if I'm willing to pay, if I'm guy number 50%, number 0.5, I will subscribe if it's optimal to subscribe if 50% subscribe, okay? And actually, what you get then is that the only rational thing is to assuming that n is equal to x hat, okay? And yeah, that should be straightforward. If you subscribe or substitute that, you get always a consistent result. And that gives you a very interesting inverse demand function, and again was too quick, namely P is x hat times 1 minus x hat. Okay? Of course, we could also put it in terms of the n's here, but that doesn't matter. However, that's if we draw this is really an interesting demand curve because it's ham-shaped. Okay, so we have an increasing part. It's an inverted U. We have an increasing part in the demand function. So the price might increase and still demand goes up here in this range. And you see the maximum price we can charge here is only 0.25, even though the maximum willingness to pay of these consumers 0 with the willingness to pay of 1 can be as large as 1 if all consumers subscribe. Okay. And of course here, if you expect no one subscribe, actually your utility will be 0 and your price you're willing to pay is also 0. Again, of course, this guy here is anyway really matter how high the number of subscribers is. And the point is that there are 2 values for each price. That's what you see. I don't know whether you see this line drawn here. And here we have what we call a critical mass. So the point is, at this price, a marginal change in the number of subscribers, either the network fails, that is a negative change, or a strong increase in demand incurs. So if you're slightly below this value in terms of the number of users, you are here, and you see the utility of or willingness to pay of your user will be this, the price is this. So what we end up with, we go down here. Okay. On the other hand, if you're slightly to the right of the critical mass, you'll see that the willingness to pay is higher for this user here than the price, and we will end up actually would end up here in this spot. Okay, so that's a really interesting thing where we have a really strange kind of demand curve due to these network externalities, due to the fact that your or each consumer's willingness to pay increases in the number of users. And here was the critical mass. Okay, yeah, of course, given we have a monopolist facing such a demand, we can, of course, immediately solve the optimization problem and suppose marginal costs are 0, okay, for the moment and for simplicity. And here we see, again, we start with the x hat. Here now you have a rather complicated cubic function, and it's, however, straightforward to solve this, and you will get that x hat is 2/3 and the price will be 2/9 here in our specific example. And you see the profit you get, here is you see for the different prices, the profit you get is about 0.14. And so the point is, with this setup, the profit maximizing choice leads to a subscription of more than half of the population, but less than the full population. Of course, it will always be more than half of the population because yeah, that's due to the in a sense the expectation management you have to make. Here we assume that our monopolist, if that's actually our monopoly price, if our monopolist charges this price, she manages to convince people that in the end there will be actually so many users. If time would permit, I would present you a Mathematica simulation where you see how with myopic consumers you would have to charge a low price in the very beginning in order to get a above this critical mass, and then you can charge this price and would end up with this number. This adds some further complication, however, in standard dynamics. I think it's interesting, but I think as we have this trouble anyway, so I just move on here. Okay, yeah, what would be the social optimum? Of course, that's the other question. The welfare function of the social planner, allowing for some positive marginal cost in order to also take into account that, is just this expression here, where the first party. So here you see in the stream, it just doesn't work, or hopefully you don't see the right kind of slides. The problem is that I also cannot show you the right slides because it's still trouble with showing you that. I try to do it here. I cannot show it to you in a PowerPoint. Perhaps I manage it to do in a PDF. That perhaps that works. I just try this very briefly, and if it, I don't know. Oh, no, it looks as if, yes. Here we are. So once I open another program, my OBS tells me that encoding is überlastet, so it has trouble with running all that. But hopefully we'll make that, and I can show you the right slides. Ah, here we are. Okay. Just to give you an idea if it works. Here you saw this. Oh, actually, I could go back and try it again. I don't know whether it's how clear it was to you. Here we are. I just could go back a minute or so. The profit you get is about 0.14. And so the point is here, then the price, and we will end up actually would end up here in this spot. Okay, so that's a really interesting thing where we have a really strange kind of demand curve due to these network externalities, due to the fact that your or each consumer's willingness to pay increases in the number of users. And here was the critical mass. Okay, yeah, of course, given we have a monopolist facing such a demand, we can, of course, immediately solve the optimization problem and suppose marginal costs are zero, okay, for the moment and for simplicity. And here we see, again, we start with the x hat. Here now you have a rather complicated cubic function, and it's, however, straightforward to solve this, and you will get that x hat is 2/3 and the price will be 2/9 here in our specific example. And you see the profit you get, here is you see for the different prices, the profit you get is about 0.14. And so the point is, with this setup, the profit maximizing choice leads to a subscription of more than half of the population, but less than the full population. Of course, it will always be more than half of the population because that's due to the in a sense the expectation management you have to make. Here we assume that our monopolist, and that's actually our monopoly price, if our monopolist charges this price, she manages to convince people that in the end there will be actually so many users. If time would permit, I would present you a Mathematica simulation where you see how with myopic consumers you would have to charge a low price in the very beginning in order to get above this critical mass, and then you can charge this price and would end up with this number. This adds some further complication, however, in standard dynamics. I think it's interesting, but I think as we have this trouble anyway, so I just move on here. As I told you, if it works, I will show you that, okay? Okay, yeah, what would be the social optimum? Of course, that's the other question. The welfare function of the social planner, allowing for some positive marginal cost in order to also take into account that, is just this expression here, where the first part here with this integral is just consumer surplus. Okay, standard value or the value below the demand curve, and the second part here is just profit. And again, you get this cubic polynomial here, and of course here what you will see, this is a complicated function, and usually we just take the derivative in order to get the welfare optimum or the welfare maximum. You will see here you run into trouble once you do that. If you differentiate with respect to n and set that equal, you run into trouble because second order conditions are not satisfied often, and we have to check for global optimality. Just to illustrate that, if we use a rather high cost here of 0.6, you see that even though we have a maximum here, this is in the negative territory, and it would be best to apply this service at all. C is equal to 0, of course. The problem is also for a social planner very easy, because then we just price equal marginal cost, and you have 100% subscriptions. So that's not so interesting the case. The more interesting case, or anyway, so here you see that the approach does not work. The more interesting case is some intermediate case like the one here where you have costs in terms of a telephone service. Okay, think in terms of a telephone service where it's really costly to add an additional household and to provide access with this to this and here you see why again it's a problem to use the differentiation approach. Again, you would end up with a minimum here, and actually you will find, and that's really interesting, find here for such a high cost, it's optimal to supply everyone. Okay, would mean that you pay subsidies. You pay subsidies. Okay, why is that so? So the social planner will serve the whole market, even though the marginal costs are as high as a maximum of the demand curve. Okay, why do we do that? It takes into account the positive network externality, and also serves customers whose willingness is smaller than a marginal cost. Even though your grandma has only a very little or small willingness to pay for WhatsApp or for internet services, then good to subsidize her, because that means that all others, like all kids and children, have the possibility to contact her. Okay, so if you add here a user who actually has a very low willingness to pay, it benefits all our users because they now can communicate with that user. And that's this network externality thing. And that also provides something or an argument for what we call universal service. Universal service, okay? That is, we should provide everyone with access to, for instance, telecom services or basic internet services. Okay? This would be an argument for universal service. And so this is really, in a way, very, very interesting, I think, and a very important part. As we have these externalities, we might even want to subsidize and sell then below marginal cost. Okay, that's what we are doing here. Yeah, that was, in a sense, our starting point, where we have these network externalities model. Richard Schmalensee, in a paper published some 2012 or something like that, called this ROFS model a model of Facebook. Okay, because there you have these network externalities as well, and you get this kind of argument. Okay, yeah. So the next point we are discussing here is once we have different technologies, old technology and new technology, should we move on, or should we stay with the old technologies? Should we move on to the new technology? And just think of WhatsApp when they were acquired by Facebook. Should we all have switched to Telegram because they provide better privacy or whatever? Okay, and here you see a problem or a very simple, say, payoff matrix where network externalities matter again. And what you will see here is, in this example, a very simple example, so we have two players with two different technologies. You see there are two Nash equilibria here. So if player B chooses the new technology, it will be optimal for player A also to choose the new technology, because 7 is of course larger than 3, and the same holds for player B if player A chooses a new technology. However, there's also this old technology equilibrium. So if player A chooses old technology, it's optimal for player B to get the 6 rather than the 4 here, and vice versa. So what we see here is that the new technology here would be really better than the old one. However, and of course you see, because it depends on each other, each one is worse off if she uses a different technology than the other. So that's due to the network externalities. Okay, and the point is here that we have these two Nash equilibria, and we might get stuck in the old equilibrium. So if everyone uses WhatsApp and you are the only one to switch away from WhatsApp, your utility decreases. And so we might have what is called excess inertia. No one moves away, even though the new technology would be better. But that would only work if you do a coordinated move, if both move at the same time. And if in terms of WhatsApp, that's all of your friends would have to move at the same time. Okay, the next point is almost exactly the same payoff matrix. The only difference is actually, do we know for sure that Telegram is better than WhatsApp? It might actually be the other way around, or actually my favorite example is always the Nokia smartphone. Was this iPhone really better than the Nokia smartphones? Actually, everyone obviously thought, and everyone jumped to the new technology, even though that's of course a tough statement, even though the new technology might have been, the new Apple technology might have been worse than the old Nokia technology. Okay, in this case, we would call that, or actually, I think it was Götz and Shapiro, who, and maybe also Helverian and Shapiro, they called it excess momentum. So we jump too quickly to new technologies. Okay, I think the nicest in a sense, illustration of this kind of arguments is by Brian Arthur in a paper in the Economic Journal in 1989. And what he does is somehow he tries to explain why it can be. Everyone always said that Microsoft is much worse than in terms of PC than the Apple. The technology is much worse, but everyone used it still. Okay, and there's a very famous paper by Paul David about the QRT standard. The QRT is just your what is Tastatur? Your keyboard, okay, and it's just your keyboard. And there were studies that everyone or we could have a much better keyboard, and this would allow for much faster typewriting. Anyway, okay, and the question is, why could we be stuck with an inefficient technology? Why could we be stuck with an inefficient technology? And so here, this is from Brian Arthur, and what he shows is here the important point is what the gain, what the adoption payoff for early adopters is. Just to understand this, what you see here, if you're the first adopter, you get a higher payoff from Microsoft A than from Apple, from Microsoft M than from Apple A. And even though in the long run, if there would have been 100 adopters, the payoff from both would have been much higher for Apple. So in the end, that's the assumption below this small table, is that in the end, technology A would have been the better one than technology M here. Okay, but how to read that? Suppose you have already 50, you are the 51st adopter. That means, and you had 30 adopters of technology M and 20 adopters of technology A. Then your payoff from adopting M would be 13, whereas your payoff from adopting A would be 10. So obviously you would adopt M, and we end in the really up, apart from some people who just like technology A, but all others will use technology M. So the point, or the interesting result, is that Yuri can come up with a situation which is not inefficient, which is clearly inefficient, okay, and in a sense also inevitable, unless Apple would be aware of that and would, in a sense, subsidize early users. Okay, that's what we have here. Okay, yeah, now we are going for these technology and standard wars. Here you see technological standards. Okay, you see there are so many different standards. These are standards for music, MP3, of course, you know, but there was also this Apple standard, which was said to have higher quality. There's Blu-rays versus high HD, high definition DVDs. Railway tracks can also be of different standards. I don't know whether you know or remember the VCRs. Perhaps your parents have something like that, where we had Betamax and VHS. We had this standard war for cell phones or cell phone technology, where I already told you that there were different standards. And for instance, you couldn't use your European smartphone, or at that time it was not a smartphone, it was a cell phone, in US and vice versa. And you had this between Apple and Microsoft. And what probably was one of the first interesting standard was the one between Edison and Westinghouse on whether we should use for transmission of electricity, whether we should use alternating current AC or direct current DC. Okay, and Tesla was also involved. There's a very nice book by Tom McNichol telling this savage tale in which I think they killed elephants with electricity to show that alternating current is too dangerous to be used. However, you might know that all of our distributions or our transmission systems in electricity use alternating current. It changes right now where we get with very long connections with high voltage direct current, but this is a very recent development. Okay, so the point is you have many different standards, and the question is what determines whether we have a single standard, whether we have two standards, whether we have a standard war, what determines who actually wins, and so on. Okay, these are questions. We just want to look into the choice of standards. What determines whether firms, firm A and firm B, choose the same standard or opt for a different standard. I replaced this slide with a few slides from Paul B. Flams and Martin Peit's book. They do pretty much the same, but the starting point is that we have two firms and we have two versions of a network good. Okay, so having a network good means that somehow it's good to have a joint standard, because then you have these network effects. However, if you have incompatible version, each of the standards will fight for getting all consumers, and might have a chance, because then, of course, in the end, all consumers want, for instance, to be able to communicate with each other. That's one of the reasons. So you didn't switch away from WhatsApp, because if you use Telegram, you cannot send a message to WhatsApp users, and so on. And so you might end up with, in a sense, a monopoly firm. Okay, and we have the same payoff structure as previously. So here you have standard A, and if both choose standard A, that's denoted here with this superscript A. Firm 1 gets this profit or payoff, and firm 2 gets this payoff, and accordingly for all of these other standards here. So 1 uses A or chooses A, 2 chooses B, and so on. That's what we have here. And now what is possible as in terms of configurations here? And there are 4 combinations of compatibility strategies possible. Compatibility just means straightforward standardization. Here, everyone chooses the same standard, and it's rather clear. So if firm, and it's illustrated here, if firm 1 is better off to choose A than standard B, if firm B chooses A, of course, and the same holds for firm B, or not for firm B, for firm 2, I have to say. For firm 2, we end up like in our excess. At least it would be a standard in our situation, and here it would be even a unique standard. Okay, that's different from our coordination game we had with the excess momentum and excess inertia. So here a clear-cut standard where everyone is clear, because if someone like firm 1 or firm 1 expects firm 2 to choose B, it would have always an incentive to move to A. Okay, because the profit is higher, and the same holds then for B, and we get actually here the equilibrium. So this is straightforward, and I don't know whether we have an assignment, but it would be straightforward to calculate it. So more important is that you have in mind what combinations are possible. Battle of the Sexes is really our example with the excess momentum and excess inertia. So Battle of the Sexes is a so-called coordination game. You have 2 equilibria, the one here and the one here, and of course perhaps Apple and Samsung both the most important thing to them is that they have a common standard for some things. Okay, and of course Apple might prefer the one standard, Samsung might prefer the other, and so it's not clear which standard we get, but the point is we will get the same standard. And here below that you just find the conditions on that, but it's rather straightforward. What is in a sense really interesting is the standards war here, and again you can look into that. If you have BB here, this part, the firm 1 would always have an incentive to move to A, and the point is also that B would also have here, or firm 1, if firm 2, actually that's I have to check here. Firm 2, however, would move away from A, whereas firm 1 would always move towards A, and so that's so if firm 2 moves away from A, that is moves to B, we would get this as a result. Okay, and yeah, that's about it here. So in this situation, here we have it. So what you see here, I just need to check. Yeah, that's what we get here. So firm 1 would move away from this situation here. Firm 2 would move away from where we have it here. Would anyway move also away firm 1 would move away from this situation and firm B would move away from that situation. So that cannot be an equilibrium, and the two further conditions just satisfy that we get two different standards. Okay, that's in a sense like all other smartphones have the USB-C or something like that in order to charge and connect your phone, whereas the iPhone has this lightning cable. And finally, the pesky little brother game, I think I already mentioned that this is also the penalty kick game where you don't have a standard. So the point here is simply, again, you can look into these different assumptions on the payoffs. But the point here is it's always optimal for firm A to move away from firm B. And the idea behind that is just think of Apple. Apple wants always to have a different standard than the others. So once the others catch up, they do a different standard. So the worst thing for Apple in a sense seems to be that they have the same standard than the other. And as the others always try to have, if Apple introduces a notch, all others will introduce a notch in the next year. So what Apple does is then they have something new and replace the notch or something like that. Okay, that's what you see. That's pretty much what you have here, different standardization things. And here Martin Peitz and Paul Beflam have a nice case study here for the next generation of DVD, which was the high definition DVD and the Blu-ray disc. Actually, you all know which standard won in the end. So if you like, you might try or write in the chat why you think the Blu-ray disc won. You see here both for the Blu-ray disc there was cooperative standardization among among the companies within this range, and for the HD DVD you also had cooperative standardization between Toshiba, Microsoft, Intel, NEC, and one Hollywood studio. Okay, and there were prominent firms in the other standard as well. So perhaps you write it in the why we have it. I don't know whether you have an idea on that, but you see there was a standard war. So this is an empirically relevant fact, and one of the firm then actually succeeded. You for some time you could also buy HD DVDs, but then it stopped. But today actually Blu-ray disc is not very important either because you just do streaming. So there's always a lot of change going on. So I think another short break here. In order to check whether everything works, because now I move on to a theoretical model which explains the compatibility decision in an industry in more detail. I didn't receive an answer by now on the standards war. Of course, here the reason probably was that we had 5 Hollywood studios here in this camp, and therefore they had much more content available. Okay. Compatibility and the hardware industry. So the point is really what are the arguments or what are the economic determinants of whether firms should or whether firms choose compatibility or not. Of course, so for instance, a computer consists of hardware and software, and main unit versus peripherals, operating system and application system. And the question is, how does compatibility affect prices, profits, consumer utilities, and so on? So in former times, you just couldn't really easily exchange your files you wrote or your text files you wrote on a Microsoft machine, on a DOS machine or a Windows machine easily with Apple, and so on. Okay, and what you had therefore were switching costs. You had a cost if you switch from one operating system to the other, because then you hardly can read your own old stuff. Okay, and you also have training costs and so on. Of course, that also holds for other technologies, like in audio, move from LP to CD, and now I still have my CD rack and my CD player, but hardly don't any because everything is streaming. Okay, again, similar with VCR and DVD. Yeah, the point is here, the computer industry is a network industry because the compatibility is so important. Okay, you see that with the Corona app, compatibility is so important that it needs to work. Now, in order to analyze that, we set up Oshai presented a simple model in his 2 textbooks in industrial organization and on network industries. And the starting point is that there's a duopoly selling a differentiated brand. So in a sense, it might be Apple versus the PC. Better here, for instance, probably works that you have VHS versus Betamax, very old discussion with video cassette recorders. You might also discuss in terms of LP records, in terms of music versus CD. here, so you have these two brands which sell at certain prices, and for simplicity, we assume that you have zero production cost. Okay, and heterogeneous consumers. The point is, so in terms of Apple and PC, that's very straightforward, because some people just like Apple more, others like Microsoft more. Some people like WhatsApp more because you can easily distribute photos and so on. Others like Telegram more because of the privacy and so on. The point is, however, that all consumers value compatibility. So you have network externalities. You would rather be, so you have some preference. Your utility increases if more people are on your network. So Apple users would like to have more Apple users on their system, because that would make it easier for them to exchange programs in former times, or in today's time, you would like to have more users on the iPhone, because then you can reach more users with your FaceTime app. Okay. And suppose you have two types of consumer. Type A, of course, the one who likes brand A more, and type B who likes B more. And in total, you have two eta consumers. We could also call it 2n, but Oshai decided to use it eta, or to call it eta. And the number of consumers is large, say millions or something like that. Okay. Now, what is consumer's utility function? Actually, you will see that it's straightforward. We could everywhere add some positive number, say 1000, but that doesn't matter here. So the important point is, if this is the number of users of brand A, okay, the utility is just this alpha factor, which in a sense covers the network effect, and minus PA. So probably it would really be best to add some 1000 everywhere here. So, because otherwise you will see we end up with negative utility. That doesn't matter anyway, because utility is only an ordinal concept anyway, and it's important that it's larger. And so, but the point here is that your utility increases if you have more users on it. And I erase it again here. Okay, and so what your utility, if QA users buy product A, is just alpha times QA minus PA. If QB users buy B, and you buy as UA as an A type, you buy B, you also have alpha times QB minus the price of B, but now you have some disutility, because you're actually an Apple lover. Now you have to use a Microsoft PC. Okay, and if B, or if A is B compatible, what does this mean? Naja, A is B compatible, so you can exchange programs. If Apple is compatible with Microsoft, you can exchange program with Microsoft users. Or if say Telegram is compatible with WhatsApp, you from Telegram can also send messages to WhatsApp. Okay, and then of course it would be the case that your network externality effect covers both Apple users and Microsoft users, or Telegram users and WhatsApp users. And again, the same thing here with B is A compatible, just the other way around, and we have the delta here. Okay, that's the important point here. So you have to understand this setup here. Okay, this delta is just a disutility parameter. We also use a similar thing in transportation cost model, in the hoteling model, and so on. UB is completely analogous. And so an important assumption here is that delta is larger than alpha eta here. So what does that mean? Now, if you have, suppose, a certain number of users, and if you have A-type users, in a sense here, the utility from B would not, for given the same prices, okay, of course, always given the same prices of B and A, the utility, or not all users would just switch to B due to the network effect. Okay, that means the network effect, and I think I have even wrote that here. The network effect is less important than the taste difference. Okay, of course, the point is, if we have the other way around, we would all end up buying the same brand in terms of WhatsApp and so on. If that's incompatible, WhatsApp and Telegram, we all end up perhaps with a single using the single and the same platform, because the network effect is so important, much more important than the taste differences. Okay, you will see that later on as well what that means. Okay, but that's an important point, and I think we even have an assignment where we abandon this assumption, and then you see you just end up with a single platform being active in equilibrium. Okay, how does the equilibrium look like with incompatible machines? Here we run into trouble because a Nash equilibrium in pure strategies does not exist, and all other models are much more complicated in which these equilibria exist. That's why Oshai presented a slide or developed another solution which he called undercut proof equilibrium, and I will present it here because in a sense it's straightforward. It's not really satisfying, but it gives you the important ideas here, and it has similar results. It leads to similar results than much more complicated models. And what is this undercut proof equilibrium? Now, first of all, define an undercut price. So here, suppose this is firm A. Which price would firm B have to charge in order to attract all users from platform A? Okay, and this is straightforward actually, because we just have to look here. The utility of users of A would be alpha QA, and actually QA, if all use of all A-type users would be this here, it would be alpha times eta minus PA, and in order to undercut, this would have, or for B to undercut with no compatibility, this would have to be actually smaller than equal, and of course we will then go for the equality, then this term here. Okay, I don't know whether I can write it, it would be alpha, and actually if B undercuts A, of course it attracts all consumers it does from A, and therefore it would have alpha times 2 eta. Okay, minus PB minus delta. Okay, and hopefully you see one of these two cancels out. This also cancels out, the PA on the one side, the PB on the other side, and actually that's what we have here. Okay, that's what we have here. This is exactly the point. So if a firm B sets this price, given firm A sets that, it undercuts and gets all the consumers from A. And such a UPE, such an undercut proof equilibrium, must satisfy the following condition. So given a certain price PB, a firm A charges the highest price such that it's not optimal for firm B to undercut. Okay, so that is, if given this price, which is not an undercut price, it must not be profitable for this firm B to undercut, and therefore this is just the price from up here. Okay, price from up here, and the point is, of course, if you do not undercut, you get only your type consumers, you only get eta. If you undercut, you get 2 eta consumers. Okay, and that's what we get. Oh, and again, I have to erase it. That should be clear. I think we have an example, therefore you should have the chance to try that. And so therefore we don't have an incentive for B to undercut A, and of course the same holds analogously for the price firm B has to charge in order that it's not undercut by A. And of course, so no incentive for firm B to undercut firm A, and no incentive for firm A to undercut B. And of course, we will look for the case in which equality holds here, and we'll solve for PA and PB, and what we get. So with the highest possible price, the weak inequalities hold as equalities, and we get these prices. Okay, to then break its delta minus alpha eta. And what you see here, again, remember our assumption. Remember our assumption that delta is greater than alpha eta. We wouldn't get, or an equilibrium here would not exist with positive prices in this situation, because you always have an incentive to undercut the other. Okay, and in the end you end up with a single firm. Okay, no interior equilibrium with 2 firms being active would exist. Of course, then we can immediately also calculate the profit, because this is simply times the number of users you have, and this is eta. And I don't want to go into explain in detail why these are not Nash equilibrium prices. If you look into it for the case of alpha is 0, the point is that you always would have an incentive to charge a different price, because if your rival charges 2 delta, you of course can increase then the price, because no one would leave you. Okay, and it also holds that you cannot have a price difference which is larger than delta, because the firm with the higher price would have a profit of 0. You cannot have a price difference which is smaller than delta, because you could always increase the price, and you cannot have a price difference equal to delta. So that's why an equilibrium in pure strategies does not exist here. Yeah, So what are the properties here? What we see, oh, and I should here have it here. So if alpha increases, if firms or if consumers value the network externality more, the price will decrease. Okay, because then it's easier to undercut the rival because you can easily attract them, and for them it's so important to have so many users that the price goes down, competition intensifies, and therefore profits also go down. Okay, that's the important thing. The important thing is with incompatible machine, you have a strong incentive to undercut because you win the whole market in a sense. Of course, what is always good is that if you have addicts to Apple or to Microsoft or to whatever, because that means increasing the degree of product differentiation, increasing the delta, and that's always good if you have more loyal customers. Okay, what happens with compatibility? So network effects do not matter for the decision which machine to buy, okay? Because it doesn't matter whether you have access to WhatsApp or to Telegram. If it's compatible, you can send your messages to each platform. It doesn't matter whether you have, so the example is clearly nonsense. It doesn't matter whether you have VHS or the Betamax, because both work on the same machine. Okay, actually there were even such thing. I have an old video cassette recorder which could run both video cassettes and CDs or DVDs. Okay, so you had these kind of compatible machines. And if it's compatible, our conditions are just the same. It's the same as previously. Just the only thing which is missing is this alpha eta. Okay, because there is no effect. So we would have could jump back to our utility function, and we see there that there is no network effect. And the same holds for the other situation. The same uniform undercut proof equilibrium condition, and we get then these undercut prices where no longer is there any network effect. But remember, the network effect reduces prices, and so you see if the network effect, in a sense, is taken away by making the machines compatible, you get higher prices and higher profits. Okay, firms charge higher prices and make higher profits. So and consumers are really worse off. That's what you can compare, because of course now you have an increased utility because you have a stronger network effect, but prices increase. Actually, here's 2 delta. Your network effect increases your, I think I should, I would have to jump to here. The price increases by 2 alpha eta, and your network effect only gives you 1 alpha eta. Okay, that's what you see here. So consumers are worse off, firms are much better off. And actually, in this simple model, so increasing utility due to compatibility is smaller than the loss. In this model, and that's already what I do later on. In this model here, it's good for consumers, good for firms, but bad for consumers to have compatibility. You will see in the end that in terms of welfare, it's good to have compatibility, but of course that depends on the welfare standard and the assumption here that every consumer buys a machine, so that we have this kind of don't have this kind of inefficiency that not everyone buys. Okay, so with one-way compatibility, that's a final point here. With one-way compatibility, if A is compatible with machine B, but B is incompatible with machine A, okay, you can make with your Google Duo, you can make calls to the iPhone because the app is available there, but not vice versa. Okay, then you can do the same things. Okay, you just have to compare. You see what happens here is that no network effects, and there's a typo in your notes. No network effect if A undercuts. Now I'm again puzzled here. So from A makes undercutting expensive for. I think this is the old version. I corrected this and it crashed down. So this should read no network effect if B undercuts A. Okay, because A is compatible with B. Oh, that was one of the changes I made. Okay, and the point is here that that's clear because A is compatible with B, and if B undercuts A, B's consumer don't gain, or former A consumers don't gain from the network effect because they could exchange their files already with B-type consumers. And so what you get here is that the firm which has compatible price, which has a compatible machine, can charge a higher price because it's very tough for firm B to undercut it, so it doesn't need to charge such a low price, and it's the other way around for firm B. It has to charge a lower price in order not to be undercut because A has the network effect working for itself. Okay, and what you see here, and I don't want to go through the detail here. What you see if you put all this together, and even though there is no Nash equilibrium for the complete game, you can here write the profit in a situation in which everything is compatible, in which everything is incompatible. And also what you will see here for firm one is also always optimal to move to compatibility, to move to one-way compatibility. So that is, we always will end up only, so I erase this, with this equilibrium here. So if we use the one-shot predetermined profits, it's rather clear that the only result can be the one where everyone chooses compatibility. And why is this so? Even in dominant strategy, it maximizes industry profits, and it makes you stronger if you have this one-way compatibility, because you prevent the rival from making use of the network effects. Okay, and what I already told you, in this situation, consumers are worse off. That's what I told you. And nevertheless, here it's good from a social point of view that you realize these effects here. Okay, and shift in distribution is here no problem with this welfare function, but again due to the realization of the network industry. And remember, everyone bought. Okay, my time ran out right now, quite drastically in a sense. Nevertheless, given that we had so much trouble in the very beginning, I would like to take, given that the stream seems to work right now, I would move on with this large part. This would take only another, say, 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah, okay, you can do whatever you want. I move on with this part. Compatibility and the software industry. Now the point is slightly different, and actually what we are doing here is almost the same kind of analysis. Previously it just was the hardware, and it was about whether you can exchange your file on the Apple with the file of Microsoft. Now we are looking into the app business. So we have infrastructure, you have a hardware and some operating system, and you have some software, the apps. Okay, and the important point is that a larger variety of software increases the value of the hardware. That's what led to the death of the Windows phone system, because there was so little apps available for them. And this is this indirect network effect. Okay, if there are more users, more software packages will be available, and there is a higher value to consumers. And software compatibility just means that the hardware machines are compatible if they can run the same software. So the problem was that the Windows Phone could not easily run the apps developed for, say, Android or for Apple. So there was no compatibility in this respect. The point here, or in terms of how does software production work, here we make a very, very simple assumption. We just assume that, as we know that the cost of shipping software are mu and constant and small, the most important part is this phi. We get a falling average cost curve, and so therefore we cannot have a perfect competition. And again, we have these two hardware producers, but now we have the number of apps available. Okay, and the software industry consists of many firms, and how many software packages we get for each of these two hardware platforms just depends on the number of users. And here we make a simplifying assumption, namely that the number of software packages available is just Q divided by phi. And phi was a fixed cost. So if we have a fixed cost of 10, say 100,000, and we have 10 million users, I think it would then be 100 software packages. Okay, that's what we do. And again, we assume heterogeneity and so on, differ with respect to the ideal variety. Same thing as previously. All consumers value compatibility, that is more apps available for you. Okay, and you have two eta consumers. And of course, we also need now our utility function. The only thing which changed is now the number of software packages which you are interested in, and not directly the number of users. Okay, what we get here, same as previous. So this was just cut and paste, and this is just the assumption that software is not so important that someone who really loves, unless it's really no software available. So I stuck to Windows Phone as long as possible until they really abolished the system. Okay, so here you see, you just assume that this delta here is sufficiently high that in equilibrium we will get these two platforms being active. Okay. And the valuation of software variety is bounded, that means, and both software hardware system are demanded in equilibrium. And now I don't want to go to the detail. I think I did it in more detail here. Even I wrote it down in more detail than previously, just deriving the undercut price, undercut proof equilibrium here. And you get some prices which almost look identically as in the previous case. So it's not so interested in a sense here. And with incompatible machines, if you get a higher network effect, you get lower prices, and this is pro-competitive. That was the same as in the case of hardware. Market size might also increase or decrease profit if alpha is large. You can look into this condition on the previous slide. That means if alpha is large, because larger market size will increase the number of software packages, and if software packages are really important in terms of these network effects, it will intensify competition, just like it did with a direct effect on alpha. And product differentiation is always clear, is always good for firms, more loyal consumers. If software development costs go up, that's an interesting case here. It's good for for our hardware producers, because that reduces competition, that reduces the number of apps available. Okay, and therefore it reduces the network effects, and therefore increases price and increases profit. Yeah, compatible system, very similar. Here, what we get is really almost the same here. Prices and profit levels are higher with compatibility than if hardware is incompatible. So until now, you might think, why the hell did I present this to you? The interesting thing is now, okay, and I don't even have any numbers. Suppose hardware machine A is partially compatible. We call that, or Oshai called that, with a degree of rho A. What that means is that a fraction rho A of the software written specifically for hardware B can also be run on A. So what will be the result? The point is that more programs are written for the machine which is less compatible, has smaller A. Okay. Now, what does this mean? Yeah, if you write something for Android, if you write something for Apple, it will also be available on Android. But if you write something on Android, it will not be available on Apple, because Apple is not compatible. The other way around. Then the point is that you love to write it for Apple. Okay, and so the point is, making your own brand more compatible makes the rival brand more attractive for consumers and users. Okay, because they know here everything which is available on Android also is available on Apple, but not vice versa. So Google Duo is available on Apple as well. All these standard Android apps are typically available on Apple, but many Apple apps like FaceTime are not available on Android. Okay, and so in a sense here, we run into trouble with respect to our result that compatibility as a whole is good for the industry as a whole. Okay, because previously in the hardware model, it was always optimal. Even if the other firm was not compatible, you had a unilateral incentive to make your machine compatible. Okay, because that destroyed the network effect. But now it's different. Now it's for the point is for your software developers. They know now if the other machine, if Android is compatible, and if you write something for Apple, it will also work on Android, but not vice versa. You will always write for Apple, and that makes Apple strong. And that's, as a consequence, you do not get easily compatibility in that industry. So you, in a sense, have a prisoner's dilemma problem here, because you might have lower profits if you are not compatible. And the point, however, here is what we did not take into account is something like you have some incumbency advantage, like you have entry barriers and so on. So it might be good in order to keep the others out of the market. And actually, probably that's what Apple wants to do. Okay, I think we are really done. The last part is software piracy. The point is here, a standard argument is that copy protection may be less profitable than no protection if network effects are strong and if there exists a group of users which has high willingness to pay for additional services. Just think of Adobe. You get the Adobe Reader for free because companies are willing to pay a lot for Adobe Acrobat in order to produce PDF files. So it might be good if you do not have protection of copyright. I think Tobias Kretschmer has a very nice paper on copyright protection in terms of songs. And there it showed that in Germany, some songs, due to some legal situation with I think it's called GEMA, with the German copyrights organization for
musicians. Some songs were not available in Germany on YouTube, and once they became available, sales increased for these songs, okay? And in particular, revenues from concerts and so on. Okay, I think I'm done with this part here, and I thank you for joining me despite and staying with me despite all these technical problems which arose today. I don't have any clue why or what was the case, but anyway, I'll check the stream once again, and if there are any questions, I'm still available on WebEx. Thank you.
I just noticed that you probably didn't hear me half of the time. Okay, so I muted the microphone. But anyway, so what I wanted to tell you is hopefully the stream worked, and I just want to show you the Mathematica simulations. Okay, and hopefully right now it works. Now I just present you this. Hopefully this is large enough. Perhaps I can enlarge it a little bit and something like this here. Hopefully you can see it. I don't know whether you ever saw Mathematica, but here what you see is just this part on network externalities, critical mass, and tipping. Okay, and we start with this inverse demand function, which is actually the thing we introduced with this Rolf's model. Okay, here is what you see is inverse demand function is nothing else than a willingness to pay of the individual consumer, and here it depends on the proportion of consumers which already use the product. And this is just Q over Q bar. Q bar would be, for instance, 100%, but if you say we have 80 million Germans, it would be just 80 million, and Q might be 10 million, so it would be 1/8 or something like that. Okay, and the point is, once you have defined this, you immediately see here these A minus Q. Just assume that the A, which is the standard vertical intercept of the demand function, just assume that this A is 100. So if we would have a standard kind of demand functions, this would be the demand functions. That's what you're well aware of. But if we have this willingness to pay function with these additional network effects, okay, then it's clear, and that's what I draw right next here, is clear if you're the only one, so that is if the share of Germans who use some telephones or telefax service is 0, your willingness to pay your utility from using this service is 0. Okay, that's why you get this shape here. And of course, if there is everyone using it, but you have someone who doesn't just value it, you get also this value of 0 or willingness to pay of 0. And of course, then otherwise you get that this ham-shaped shape of the demand curve. Okay, that's what you have. And if you show these two things, it just looks like this here. Okay, now typically what in order to run some interesting simulations, what I assume, and that's rather similar to say a pandemic or an epidemic, you always need some users who buy anyway, so unconditional demand users which have a high standalone valuation of the product. If you think in terms of the fax machine, which was Rolf's example, I guess, there were just some large companies who used that fax machine internally, so it was not a discussion. They didn't care about the number of users which use that service, because they knew they could internally just send faxes. And here what I assume, and probably I just best evaluate it rather than explaining it. So from starting, so you have 10 users who just have a willingness to pay of 100 for this service, okay, irrespective of the number. So these would be some autonomous consumers. But from then on, you just have the standard. What is clear, if you have 10 users, that is, if you have in total 100, it would be just 10%. Then the 11th user would have just this willingness to pay, where you have this 100 minus something minus 10 or minus times this 10%. Okay, that's how you derive this thing here. And the formal definition is just stated here, and you see if you're user number 1, you have this autonomous kind of utility of 100, but if you're the 10th user, you only have this 9. Okay, that's exactly what I just showed you. I don't know whether you can see my mouse, but probably you cannot, but probably it's better. But you see here, if you go to the 10, you would end up with something like 9 or 10 with the willingness to pay. So in a general form, you just write it like this here. I don't know, Mathematica is a great thing. Unfortunately, we no longer have a campus license for Mathematica. But what you can do here is then just write it for the case where you have a rather high autonomous utility. Okay, so here the point is you have k, some autonomous utility k, so you would have the standard kind of you would have 100 minus q plus 100 minus q times this percentage of users. Then you see it almost looks, it really looks interesting, and it gets even more interesting if we vary that k, because if we vary this k from 0 to say up to 1.5 at 0.25, you see you can produce, and I even tried to come up with nice colors, you can produce very interesting demand functions, where the lower red one is the original one from Rolf's, and the higher one is one where you, in a sense, have both the network effect and this autonomous effect. Okay, I think we even have an example in the tutorial class. I think this part comes from or the suggestion comes, at least I took it from the textbook from Martin Peitz and Paul Beltran. So here you get very interesting demand functions, as you see. And the point I wanted to show you is this dynamic part. If I have another 2 or 3 minutes, or probably 5, this is I wanted to show you. I don't have it here, but the problem was here. If you remember that this was our 25, and we had, unfortunately, I cannot draw something here in Mathematica, but the point is here, the monopoly price was 25 or 21, I think, something about like that. And the point is, if you now start from the very beginning with that price and your consumers arrive one after the other, then the first consumer arrives in your store, in your Apple store. No one else has bought it. So he's the first, or she's the first consumer. The point is the percentage of buyers is 0 at that point. And if this consumer has myopic expectations, in the sense that she expects that no one else will also buy subsequently, okay? Then the point is, of course, if you charge a price of 20, no one here will buy, okay? And you have to go, you have to have at least this number of consumers, about 25 consumers. Unfortunately, I cannot really draw here. This number of consumers attracted so that you get over the critical mass. And that's what I tried to do here. So we start here with something, and the point is here, if you have these, I think here I use the autonomous consumers. So if you charge, I think here the P is the second variable here. If you charge a price of 10, only the first 9 or the first 10 consumers will buy, and then no one buys subsequently. Only these autonomous consumers with the high willingness to pay will buy. Okay, and if you charge, however, a price of 5, the point is almost everyone until 95% will buy, because then you get Okay, that's the relevant part here. Of course, if you charge a price of 10, the willingness to pay of the 10th guy will be just 9. That was exactly the point why this guy no longer buys. But if you have a lower price of 5, everyone will buy. Okay, almost everyone until you end up there in the large pot. So, and the willingness to pay of the 90th guy will be 9. So she still buys. And here, just a price of 0, everyone will buy. And here you just can write. And what we can do, or what I did here, I animated this part. Hopefully it works. And I can play. And here you see, oh, and the thing you see here, if you start from a price of 0, okay, I have to slow it down. You start from a price of 0 and you increase the price very slowly. And until at the moment you jump at 10, your sales go down drastically. Okay, because no one buys. After the 10th buyer, no one buys. Okay, that's your problem. Okay. Yeah, that's what we have here. And here I did another animation where, oh, I have to make this smaller now. I made an animation with both price and demand. Perhaps you can see that more clearly now if it isn't too small. But here you see if you increase the price, if you have it too high, your demand collapses. Here you see it's really important how you set the prices, and the expectation management is also important. Okay, and here you have, of course, you cannot do a lot of expectation management because they just don't believe you that you will sell more, because everyone keeps telling them that everyone will buy a certain product. Okay, yeah, here you see how important it is that you get the price right. If you start with a too high a price, you get this here. I think this is pretty much the same thing here. Yeah, this is just now over time what you get, and here the important point here in the next diagram, what I did here, and I think I just enlarge it here a little bit. What I did here is, here you see the timeline on a abscissa and the demand, and I have two different prices. I think the one in red is a price of 10 and a price of 9, as you see up here, and the blue one is a price of 8.9, and you see what the difference is. Okay, with a price, or the blue one is the price of 9 and the red one is the price of 8.9. So here you see only 10 cents depend or determine the fate of your product. Okay, I think I have done this. Yeah, and what I did here is I just solved for the static equilibrium. That's what I did in the diagram anyway, and you see that you get exactly this Q, and you get exactly this this price, and the price was 22.22, and this is then the quantity, of course, and yeah, I think that's about it. And here you see this other point that you, in a sense, have two solutions. And of course, the solution with the low quantity and the high price is the right kind. You have both prices the same. Here you have this 22 is the solution, and you have either the low quantity or the high. And of course, you want to sell on the decreasing part, or in this decreasing branch. Okay, I think I run out of time anyway right now. I could have done I could have do that now for some time. You can see the difference here between when you increase or decrease a price after you meet the critical mass. You can sell here your quantity. If you can increase the price at a certain point in time, And the point is, if you increase the price too quickly, you choke off demand. If you do it at the right time, you still increases. And here the point is, after t equal 33, so that is 33 people have bought. If you already, or 32 have bought, if you increase the price then to the monopoly price, that is, you increase the price before you are beyond the critical mass, then you don't make any further sales. If you wait a second here, if you wait another second here, then actually I have drawing tools, it tells me. Anyway, if you do it too early, you don't sell anything. If you do it later, all these people here will buy. Okay, I think I stop here. Perhaps next year we can do that even more, because here I also have a duopoly where you will see, or where you could have seen that, or the story between Apple and Microsoft, and Apple perhaps charged too high prices in the very beginning, given that it, I'm speaking about some time in the 1980s, okay? And of PCs and Apple Macintosh. Given that the Wintel PC, or the PCs based on Intel and the MS-DOS operating system, already had some network or some network effects and some advantage. Okay, anyway, so hopefully it was somehow clear. I think these are amazing stories. And it's rather interesting because it tells you a lot about expectation management and so on. But anyway, if there are further questions, I'm just available in WebEx. And of course, Max is also available in the tutorial class. And thank you for staying with me. Hopefully it worked. And see you and goodbye.